welcome back to Room 237, and as we get down to the end of this long Italian horror and Giallo film marathon, I'll be wrapping up the films I have by Dario Argento, and when it comes to Giallo, there'll be some not only lesser known, but also ones that kind of towed the line between Giallo and other genres. And this one is no exception. It's a film by Duccio Tessari, who's also known for spaghetti westerns, but he also directed the Giallo, The Bloodstained Butterfly, which I have reviewed. But this was his first Giallo, 1970s. Death Occurred Last Night. This is the rare video release, so this is like the 6th or 7th release I have by them. And it stars, Frank Wolf, who I've also seen him in, I think it was Death Walks at Midnight. I always forget which one between the two he was in. High Heels. Death Walks on High Heels, which came out the following year. Cold Eyes of Fear, which I do believe is a Giallo. That's one I've been looking into getting. The Giallo film Carnal Circuit, which I would like to see. And he was also in an episode of Twilight Zone. It also stars... I just frigged this up. Raph Vallone and Gabrielle Tinti. Might actually be Gabriel, because the guy that plays his partner. And it's based on the novel The Milanese Kills on Saturdays by Giorgio Scribinenko. And music was by Gianni Ferrio, which I'm not sure I know of any of his scores. He scored a lot of films. He did do Bloodstained Butterfly, Death Walks at Midnight, Puzzle, which is a great Giallo. It kind of goes along with this as well. Not in narrative, but in just kind of style. Alright. And yes, as I said, and Duccio Tessari, he contributed two songs to the score, which normally with Giallo, one thing I can always say is a big plus. With this, it's one of the detractors. I wasn't the biggest fan of the score, which kind of mixes jazz, baroque, and some psychedelic sounds. But especially the songs that Tessari contributed, I found those songs kind of annoying. But I'll get back to the score. Now, as I've said before about some Giallo films kind of towing the line between that and some other genres, mostly Poliziotteschi. I mean, you look at Suspicious Death of a Minor and What Have They Done to Your Daughters, more specifically. Those are very much prime examples of hybrids. You can definitely see the Giallo, you can definitely see the Poliziotteschi, because both halves are very, very much somewhat formulaic in their mixture. Whereas this, also the time it came out, 1970, which is that odd year between pre and post Argento, the year that Bird of the Crystal Plumage came out. So it was right in between Giallo being like the pre-Argento kind of formula, and then everyone trying to copy him. So Giallo wasn't quite perfected yet, and I'm not very well versed in Poliziotteschi, so I don't really know the evolution of that genre. But to my understanding, 1970, I think that genre was well in its infancy as well. And so even though it qualifies as both, I'm pretty sure you can call it Giallo, call it Poliziotteschi, you can call it both, you can call it neither. You can just call it a crime film. But one thing this does differently is, because even though the only other film by Tessari I've seen is The Bloodstained Butterfly, he is known for his style. Not quite like Argento, but his own distinct style of filming. And Giallo is a genre that relies heavily on the aid of audio and visual to help tell the story, whereas this takes a very realistic approach, a very raw approach to this story. It doesn't have, I mean, there are some great shots in it, but it intentionally doesn't, it's intentionally trying to go as realistic as possible, not trying to be visually or with music stylish to help tell it. Even though, as before, I said the score does get distracting, because it does. I'm actually going to put the light back up here because that's kind of distracting me as well. But, and I guess Frank Wolf's character as Lamberti has kind of been known as the Poliziotteschi archetype. There's a sort of guy that toes the line of moral ambiguity. But I thought he was a great character. I really liked his performance, as I did for Raph Vallone. And this movie wastes no time. This movie literally starts. I mean, it's a 98-minute movie, or at least this cut I have is 98 minutes. And the title, whether it's Death Occurred Last Night or The Milanese Kills on Saturdays, I think some people would be quick to dismiss the Giallo aspect of it, because there's not a murder until about 50 minutes in, and it's the murder that, is the big case. But, there is constant investigation from the very first scene. It just so happens that the murder doesn't occur until about 50 minutes in. And then if you go by The Milanese Kills on Saturdays, it's like the very last scene of the movie. And it is more of a procedural film. Like, you don't have someone outside of law enforcement trying to solve it, even though there is that aspect. But it doesn't show too much of that investigation, at least not till after an hour in. But it opens right up with Raph Vallone. Well, first we get the shots of the city of Milan with the crazy bombastic music over the credits. And then Vallone, who plays Amanzio Berzaghi, goes into the police department and says, "My daughter's missing. I can't find her." And his daughter's name is Donatella, who is known for her tall height. I mean, she's 6 feet tall. Very, very, very beautiful, but she has the mind of a 3-year-old, which I don't want to say they didn't take that role seriously. I mean, they really just put pigtails on her, kind of make her all with like a teddy bear. But she's also a nymphomaniac. So that dichotomy of characteristics is strange, but it works. And, she always draws attention from men outside. He has to make sure the shutters and the doors are super locked, so she can't get out. But she's missing. And the only other thing that's missing is this one distinctive teddy bear that he found somewhere and gave to her. So the whole movie, or at least that first 50 minutes, is Lamberti and his partner following the clues, trying to find the guy's daughter, which they quickly find out that she was probably abducted and put into some sort of prostitution ring, which that's where we get the character, what was his name, Salvatore, played by Gigi Rizzi. I thought he was a very young version of the lead from Body Puzzle and also The Church, but it did look a lot like him, but it wasn't him. He's a car salesman, but he was very much involved with big prostitution rings. This is an example of the kind of morally sort of ambiguous kind of character that Lamberti is. He has his wife, who works for a newspaper, act like she's test driving a car at Salvatore's dealership, and she hides a stash of cocaine in his car so that when Lamberti and his partner show up, they find it, and they kind of use that to be like, well, now we're gonna get you. It was his idea to have her do that. Also, what's interesting is when we see Lamberti and his wife together at home, it's actually very relaxed. It's very calm. They get along great up until about the end. You know, it's not this sort of hectic, sort of spiteful relationship that you had in a lot of pre-Argento Gialli. And they both just kind of share stories about their jobs and the good and bad about their jobs. I thought that was interesting. So with the help of Salvatore, they're able to sort of infiltrate the prostitution circuit, not as cops, but sort of as friends. Like they say they're a friend of the girl in the photo. They meet this one prostitute who, I keep forgetting her name, Herrero, who's played by Beryl Cunningham, which that name sounds familiar. I know I've seen her before. She was in The Weekend Murders, which I have not seen yet. That's one I've wanted to get. Don't know what that is. Okay, I could have swore I've seen her before, but she's a Jamaican actress. And she does a good job in this role. This is one that I would say does have good performances, especially by Wolf and Vallone. I think they both really do a great job with their roles. But Herrero is like this kind of suicidal, or they make it seem like she is, prostitute who she's protecting her pimp, but she really doesn't want to. And she's been a prostitute since she was 14, doesn't really know what else to do. But she says, oh yeah, there was this client who has a thing for different girls, you know, whether they're a different race or a different height or there's something unique about them. He has a thing for that. So then Lamberti actually takes her in to his home. I thought it was sort of as like a safe house, but I guess it's a safe house, but also to look after her because she keeps popping these pills and drinking. And eventually his wife tries to help her out. And this movie loves montages. That was one thing that sometimes there montage and flashback. Those are two things that come up a lot in this film. So sometimes they're very helpful or done very well. Sometimes they seem very frequent, and there's a long montage of when they're, or a series of long montages when they're sort of infiltrating the prostitution circuit, and it the score is so loud and bombastic and crazy, and it does keep building up. That by the end of it, I'm literally just like, like it's performing in my living room. Like I'm just like, damn, that's loud. It really does get distracting. It, or for me, it was very distracting. But, so then at the 50-minute mark, we see some random guy finds a body out in the middle of nowhere, a burnt body, and you find out it's Donatella. So that's where I'll get into spoilers, but some other things that, like when the father is explaining to Lamberti in the beginning who his daughter is, how she is, and just how he looks after her. Every time it cuts back to scenes of her, it plays that song. I'm guessing that Tessari wrote, and I find that song annoying. But so it'll keep cutting back. So I was turn the TV down. Then it'll cut back to them talking in the police station, and then it'll cut right back to it. But there are times where those flashbacks work, like when the father goes in to identify the body in the morgue. Which it's a great scene because they're walking down and Lamberti actually stops him and he says, by law, you don't have to identify the body in this condition. My say-so will be enough to, make everything that happened that needs to. Your identification is not needed. That is one of the strong, good moments from Lamberti. How he walks that line of morality. And just the way he played it, I thought was very good. And the way the father responds by saying, I'm her father. This is what I need to do. We, the audience, when he walks up to the body, they unwrap starting with the feet, and we see that, she's kind of messed up. But then it cuts up to his face, and we can tell they uncover her more. He turns to look at her face to see, okay, let's see if it's her. But then right as he looks, it cuts to a small montage of flashbacks of her, stuff we've seen in the beginning with that song playing. So it's as soon as he sees and knows it's her, that all floods back. And I thought that one of the more stylish moments, but it's done in such a realistic way, a brutally realistic way, that when reality comes crashing in, that's probably what would happen. And that is one thing that I've seen people say about this, is that it's one of the more brutally honest kind of Giallo films. It's played so seriously and so straight. And I don't mean seriously as in it's super serious. I mean, there's some humor. I mean, there's the running gag of Lamberti telling his partner to get a haircut. He does that a lot. There's the way they kind of fuck with people they're interrogating amongst each other. The partner at one point hands his gun, his badge. He's like, I resign. He's like, oh, okay. Just so he can beat the hell out of this one guy that they're interrogating. And he says, oh, I haven't accepted your resignation, so you're back on the force. So he stops. So it's played super straight and serious, as in, is taking itself seriously and it's not relying on style and, you know, finesse to really help tell the story. It's just playing it straight, and it comes across as brutally honest and, you know, very. At times, it's quite the downer. I mean, after he identifies the body, he goes back home and, you know, he's crying. He's moving very slow because it's settling in, but he's taking all her clothes down, packing all her dolls away, and, you know, it's a pretty down, sad moment. And this movie is able to get the uh, emotional aspects of the story across without the uh, visual or the visual style or audio style or whichever, you know, with how straight is playing it, which doesn't always work or isn't always as engaging sometimes. But I thought it did very well. So with that, I'm gonna get into spoilers, but yeah, if you want to see a Giallo that, you know, is almost a polar opposite of like an Argento film or Fulci or Martino, and just something that's played straight, but is still done well and does have a interesting, compelling story that does go at a good pace. Um, you know, it's not a body count Giallo. It's a missing person up until about 50 minutes, and then it's a murder investigation. But, you know, it also just playing it realistically, but also riding the line of Poliziotteschi, where it is more of the procedural kind of film. Which, one last thing I'll say, because I mentioned it earlier, about how someone outside of law enforcement doing their investigation is when he takes all of her stuff down to the garbage. Another great scene between Wolf and Valone is Lamberti tells him, you know, you go inside and get some rest. I'll wait here for the garbage truck. And if you can't sleep, take these 2 pills. They'll knock you out. And he says something else, and then the father says, hey, if you're worried about me killing myself, you know, I want to see who killed my daughter, and I need to be there to see them get justice, essentially. And even if you don't find them for many years, then many years will I live until I see that. So it's another, you know, just another great moment of Lamberti doing a very good thing. And then when he leaves, the garbage truck comes up, and one of the garbage truck drivers is like, if you're throwing this away, I mean, can I have it? I have kids. The price of toys are crazy. But can you help me get them in the cab? And then he notices the daughter's teddy bear that was taken is up on the dash. And that's a vital clue. So he asks for it back, and he realizes, you know, because they tell him it was picked up right here at this house about a month ago. Okay, that's about how long this investigation is. About a month and a half. And so that's when he's standing on his back balcony, and he says, someone I know, someone I've talked to before in this building is responsible. So then during the third act, when it cuts to him, he's going around asking people around the building, you know, have you seen my daughter? Do you know what happened to her? Whatever. And it does build up to a good conclusion. You know, and actually a pretty depressing climax too, but, you know, I actually kind of put this off for a while because I wasn't the biggest fan of, like, what have they done? What have they done to your daughters? Just like the mixture of Poliziotteschi, but I think this actually did it very well, especially where Giallo and Poliziotteschi was not as formulaic as it would be, and still kind of in its infancy of both genres. That there was more to play with, there was more to do, and just the mixture of that and how straight it's played, along with the performances and just a good story, it made a pretty good and effective Giallo Poliziotteschi film, but in a very sort of more brutally honest, kind of depressing way. But with that, I'm going to get spoilers. So once the body is found and the investigation starts picking up, the first one to get killed and to show Lamberti that they know that the police are closing in on him is Salvatore, the car salesman that has a past and know-how of prostitution. It's showing him flee, like he knows people are gonna come after him, which they do, and they put the killer on the back. I mean, this is spoilers, so I mean that's the killer. And another thing which I don't think we see the killer as like an actual character. Maybe we see him like in passing or like a glimpse. I don't remember seeing him as an actual character. Maybe that's more of the Poliziotteschi kind of part of it, because with Giallo, it's always a character that we've seen before. But eventually, Herrero, the girl that he's taking care of, she finally opens up and decides to betray her pimp to Lamberti. And that's what she says, because she talked about how I think she's like in love with her pimp. She's been with him for a while or something like that. And she even says, so I've decided to betray him to you. And this was shortly after his wife had this long conversation with her about trying to better herself and get out of the life. Which it does a great, the camera just pulls back during this whole conversation through like multiple doors in hallways. It's a very long but great a backtracking shot. So she gives the name of her pimp. So then I just gotta look up his partner's name so I don't have to keep calling him partner. But it was Mascaranti. I don't know if I pronounced that right, but there's several names that they go after, because there's this one guy where this is the part where Mascaranti says he resigns, then he beats the hell out of him, and then Lamberti says, I haven't accepted it yet, so you're officially back on the force. And that's when he says, I don't really know the name of the guy, but he owns this hotel. So they go to the hotel, and the owner says, well, you're looking for my cousin, who has the same name as me, Franco. Oh, of course it's not on here. They're both named Franco. I can't remember what his last name was. Of course, it doesn't say. Probably because he's not in it until the very end, but... And then there's this other friend named Michelle, and then the woman that runs the laundry, which we did see her at one point, which maybe that was part of the Giallo, where it's a character that we've seen before, because Berzaghi, I keep forgetting how to pronounce his name properly too, which really makes me feel, yeah, Berzaghi. Amanzio Berzaghi. He goes to the laundromat at one point. They have an exchange, but how he finds out is because during his investigation, there's this woman who's carrying oranges, and she's like, "Oh, here, have an orange," and he has the teddy bear under his arm. So when he goes to grab an orange, she sees it and like panics. So that's when he goes and interrogates her, and she tells him the names of Franco, this Franco, and his friend Michel, and the one from the laundromat. So it's really like a neck and neck investigation for who's going to get to them first, Lamberti or Berzaghi. And I'll say it does have. I gotta plug my phone in. It does have, it's a good buildup of suspense, and the way it's done, like, well, actually, I'll say that for when it gets to it, but, so, Lamberti's talking to the cousin who owns the hotel, and he says, the reason why I never said anything is because he said he'll burn down the hotel, and one thing that's kind of like puzzle is that, while the woman with the oranges and the guy that runs the hotel, while they're telling Lamberti and Berzaghi what happened that night, we get it in flashbacks, but very quick flashbacks. And so then, Lamberti looks at the hotel registry, and then he has to find addresses for all of them. But Berzaghi goes down to the laundromat, and he just attacks the woman and asks her why. Why? And I don't remember exactly why they decided, because the woman with the oranges said something about how, a combination of things, like, you always talked about how it was very difficult to take care of her, but also she was, because of her sexual activity, we thought, kind of, sort of saying, we thought we'd be doing you a favor. But also, it seemed like Michel really wanted to do it, and it seemed like he really liked me, so I did it for him, meaning get Donatella out of the apartment. And then Franco, Michel, laundromat woman, they leave. They take her to the hotel where they heard screaming, which we also hear the hotel owner, Franco, tell Lamberti this, was that there was all this screaming from her, and then he kicked them all out. And so while Berzaghi is holding the laundromat woman and says, "Why'd you kill her?" Pretty much her reason, because she was a nuisance. That's what she said, because she wouldn't stop crying. Got kicked out of the hotel because of her crying, and then the cops were on to us. She was crying. We just had to stop and get rid of her. She was too dangerous to us. She was useless to us at that point. We had to get rid of her. And, the realization and the way Vallone portrays this was, well, I think he's saying this to the one with the oranges was, you mean that day she was right here. She was in the same building. And I went down to the police department. I looked everywhere I could. I was going mad, and she was right here across the hall. The way he portrays that realization was very well done. And the way he just says, my baby was a nuisance. My baby wouldn't stop crying. I mean, he's taking like sheets and laundry and like taking a new one out of the hamper, like beating her with it. So like you could have brought her back home. I would have taken her home. My baby wouldn't stop crying. Of course, he's letting out this rage. And it doesn't seem over the top. It really does seem like a dad who's finally found his daughter's killer. It was a very kind of frivolous, because she wouldn't stop crying kind of reason. And so, but she is able to call, right before he starts beating her like that, she is able to call Michelle and Franco and say, he's here. He knows everything. She calls him on a red phone. They show up. And I will say, it is a bit anticlimactic. Those two are killed pretty easily. I mean, at least it's not a long chase scene across rooftops, which almost always happens. But, like he grabs Michelle. Franco's trying to tell him to get out of the way, but when he shoots, he hits Michelle anyway. And then he's able to grab Franco, and he punches him a few times and like closes his head in the dryer. I'm guessing till it snaps his neck or suffocates him or both. But I do like how as they're fighting, it keeps cutting back to when the two guys lured Donatella away down into like the field or wherever she was. They laid down with her and like calmed her down, and it keeps cutting back pretty quickly. And then just as it like shuts his head in the dryer, that's when it zooms in on Franco reaching behind him to take out a wrench. And then like right before it cuts away, right before he hits her, to show like, both kills kind of happening simultaneously. I thought that was I liked how that was done. And then that's right when Lamberti shows up. Of course, they see all three people are dead except for Barzaghi. And he's kind of lost it at this point. Like, I think he's just in so much shock because, Lamberti's like, I catch murderers. That's what I get paid for. You just had to sit home and rest. But I think he's just in so much shock that all he says is, like, today's Saturday. It's my day off. I had time to look for him. If I had been working, then you would have got to him first. I had to be the first one to see their faces. And he just keeps saying, it's Saturday, it's my day off. It's Saturday, it's my day off. Which ties into the title of the book, The Milanese Kills on Saturdays. Which, and yes, they do say, well, actually they say her death took place last night, which is around the 50-minute mark. But so yeah, the title of the book would come from the very last scene of the movie. And then as the sirens get louder, it zooms up and freezes on his face. He's got blood on him from the fight. Which the last frame has this very unrestored, gritty quality to it, which I love. But yeah, freeze frame and movie. So yeah, it's a very brutally honest and very played straight. You can definitely see, even pre-Argento, when Giallo was kind of open to, there was a formula, but it was very open. It was more nebulous than post-Argento, and the Poliziotteschi influence on it. But it does do a very good job at really being able to tell not only a good story, but not rely on visual style and flair and everything else to help tell the story. It just with how straight and seriously it does it. And yeah, I don't know if I mean I guess because there's multiple people who are guilty at the end. The Giallo part of it was that we've seen the woman from the laundromat before. The other guys, not so much. So you have the Giallo, Poliziotteschi kind of perps there as well. But yeah, so where I kind of put this off because I wasn't really into seeing one that was pretty much half and half with Poliziotteschi again. I mean, as much I didn't hate Suspicious Death of a Minor or What Have They Done to Your Daughters. I just wasn't the biggest fan of them. But of all the ones like that, I'd have to say this is probably the best. It probably pulls it off the best. And I might even like this more than Bloodstained Butterfly. I'm not entirely sure. But yeah, I thought this was very solid. And it's not too often you could say this about Giallo, but like I said, the score was one of its biggest flaws, at least in my opinion. I thought the song or songs was just more annoying than anything. Parts of it was catchy, but then it gets annoying. And the score itself was just got to be really distracting. So the score was a detractor. But the performances, the acting was actually one of the stronger points of the film. Don't really get to say that too often. And I really liked the story too. I think it unfolded at a good pace, and yeah, it followed the writing logic that Giallo follows while also maintaining the straight realism of telling it visually. And yeah, like the nice pullback it does, and that one scene or the way it uses flashbacks for certain cues to kind of create like a parallel with what's going on in the present. It's I thought it was a pretty solid film. I was actually impressed with it. I went into it not knowing too much about it or expecting too much, but I actually enjoyed it quite a bit. Death occurred last night. I'm glad I picked this up. So yeah, I'm getting down to the end of it. I just have Fatal Frames and The Designated Victim. Those are the last two I have that I own. But then I have The Possessed coming in, and I will have that Nothing Underneath and Too Beautiful to Die double feature coming in, and The Embalmer, also known as The Monster of Florence. I'll have those five eventually. But right now I just have Designated Victim and Fatal Frames left. And just two more Argento films as well. So I keep saying we're getting down to the end of it, but then I buy a couple more. But we are getting down to the end of it. So stay tuned for those, and thank you for watching.